You know, you've heard it time and time again, a massive data breach popping up quite often, impacting thousands, if not more, so many consumers out there and raising a lot of concern. But there are some things that you can do to keep your information safe. Dave Hatter is here to talk more about that. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you with us. I think this is so important. A lot of folks are, more cautious about certain things. Credit cards are a big thing to be watching out for in terms of fraud and identity theft, right?
They are, because obviously if someone can get your credit card, they can make a lot of charges, and then that's on you until you can invoke the Fraud Act, and you're limited to how much you have to pay. But debit cards, I think, are an even bigger problem, because if someone can steal your debit card, they can basically take all the money out of whatever account is associated with that, and that's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get back than if it's a credit card. In fact, my general advice is you probably should shop with credit cards. Of course, you got to, pay them off at the end of the month.
Of course,
but
yeah.
it limits your exposure to fraud if someone does steal it, because they can't just drain your entire account with a card.
Now, of course, you can get access from your credit card online. Digital, I feel like, is becoming a lot more kind of a scary place when it comes to people getting your information and us giving our information without even realizing it.
I think you're absolutely right. Nowadays we tend to be more the product of a lot of companies as opposed to the customer. You've got all kinds of organizations like Facebook and Google collecting enormous amounts of information. We've seen large companies like Equifax, which collect information about you that perhaps you didn't even provide. They're buying it from other places, or they're getting it through credit reporting. These companies get breached, your information is out there, and the more information that's available about you, the easier it is for a hacker or a thief to get a hold of some part of your identity, and then use that additional information to assume your identity and do all kinds of nasty things like open a loan in your name, potentially steal the money out of your account, get health insurance benefits under your name, all kinds of bad stuff.
So you got to be very vigilant about that.
You really
Before
do.
we get into some ways to kind of curb all of that, I want to talk about skimmers as well, because we have some video to show you of what those look like. We hear about them all the time, but here's a good example of what it looks like at an ATM. Looks like a regular card insert for your credit card or your debit card, but really, it's a skimmer.
Yeah, in many cases, these things have gotten very small and very sophisticated. They slide right in the slot and kind of sit in there, and someone doesn't even need to have wired access to it. Through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, they can be nearby, extract the information from that skimmer, and of course, when you put your card in there, they've now stolen your information off the card. So one of the pieces of advice that people generally give is before you stick your card in, look very carefully at the slot, try to move it. If it feels loose or anything, that might be an indication that there's something wrong with it, and you should probably use a different device.
Very good advice. Wiggle it around, and they've gotten really good. When you see that video, I would never be able to tell if I didn't juggle it around or if someone didn't show me that. So
yeah, unfortunately, they're pretty tricky.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful.
What are some other ways that we can protect ourselves really quickly?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do online. Provide as little information as possible. Make sure you're using, same advice we always give about cybersecurity. Strong password, different password for every account. But there's a lot of things in the physical world you can do that people don't think about. A lot of identity theft is done by dumpster diving. People go around and dig in your trash. So if you have sensitive documents that have things like a social security number, driver's license number, you need to store those in a safe place. You need to shred those documents or burn them or something. Don't just throw them in the garbage, because people will steal that stuff out of the garbage knowing they can assume your identity. And then, of course, again, kind of going back to the cybersecurity side of it, don't use public Wi-Fi. Check your bank statements. If you think there's even the slightest instance of fraud, like you see things that show up that don't make sense, or you get bills that you didn't expect, you can go freeze your credit. Now that's free. As of the 21st of this year, you'll get a free credit report from one of the 3 bureaus. You can file a fraud alert, and with a fraud alert, it basically freezes your credit, and a company has to contact you before they issue any kind of new loans or anything. So the FTC has a lot of great tips. The Federal Trade Commission, I would suggest folks check those out and follow their advice. There's some good advice there.
Dave, we always appreciate you coming in. You might have heard some of those things before, but you got to stress it because it keeps happening.
It keeps happening, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Frank, over to you.
Okay, thanks.